Hi, I'm Rides. Welcome to another episode of Buyers Beware. In this episode, we're going to be talking about damaged goods. So bikes that are being sold, damaged, and potentially the person selling hasn't actually disclosed what's wrong with it. So we always see bikes like this one that have been slammed into a wall or dropped or gone downstairs or whatever it is. Or this one snapped in half, or a little more common, it might be just snapping a part of it or cracking through a seat tube. The problem is when some of these bikes make it back onto the market. So I've been watching eBay, as I always do, and came across this particular bike. It's a Schwinn Predator Freeform, probably late 80s, I would expect, mid to late 80s. But as you can see, the heading Predator Freeform X mid-school BMX frame, 12-inch, which I don't believe it is, I think it's a 20. This frame has been used. Please look at the photos and add text for complete condition and description. Sold as is. Let's have a look at the description. So a legendary old school classic BMX frame set from Predator. It's actually Schwinn. Just needs some touch-up welding for that industrial BMXer out there. Then just add a few components and you're ready to hit the ramps. Okay, so what do they mean by a little touch-up welding? Okay, it's got some intact decals. Okay, here we go. So this is pretty catastrophic. The top of the seat tube has completely snapped off. So it's probably had a crack around the keyhole, around the whole thing, and it's snapped straight off. But that's not the only thing. It's also got a massive crack through the down tube. There would be absolutely no point in getting this frame set fixed. The seller is asking for pretty good money, $147.84 US. It's essentially unfixable. It would cost you way more to fix this than the bike is worth. Don't go and buy something that's got this kind of damage to it. It needs to be thrown away. But that's a pretty obvious one. And yes, the seller did show us that there was some welding required. But a couple of bikes that I've also watched over the last few months weren't so good. A classic for being damaged is the mid-school alloy frames from Mongoose, the Solution and the Super Goose. This particular one's a 1996. It does have 1994 decals on it. I don't know why. Doesn't really matter. Had been looking at this one for sale on eBay. Looked pretty good. Obviously loads of photos showing the dropouts, various bits and pieces. The bottom bracket looks fine. Stamp's still there. Then obviously looking at the head tube, can't really see anything in that photo. However, when you get to this particular photo here, this is where I start to look in much more detail at these particular frames. You need to look up at the top and down at the bottom of the head tube. And you can see on the right hand picture over here, there is a very tiny line, and that is an indication of a crack. So the cracks normally happen down the back here on the head tube, top and bottom, and that will crack all the way through and begin to crack down through that weld as well. It can be fixed, but it's fixed at a pretty high cost. So you would not be wanting to pay full price for this particular frame. Another frame that I watched when I first saw this, 1983 Chrome Redline PL24, tiny crack on the seat tube. I was like, okay, let's have a look. So we can see here that's got around the top, again, this keyhole issue, a little crack around there. But on the side view, on the photos, you can see this is not a little tiny crack. This is where that top of the seat tube has cracked almost all the way through the entire top of the seat tube. This is exactly what has happened to the Schwinn Predator, except that crack has gone all the way through and the top of that seat tube has fallen off. Again, it is fixable, but it will come at quite a large cost. The next bike is this GT Speed Series. This is actually a bike that I purchased. I realized that this bike wasn't as good as the ad made out. It was selling for 190 Australian, which is pretty damn good for a Speed Series. The write-up for this one really didn't give any indications whatsoever. Generic description of the condition, and then the owner has written BMX bike, ex-factory race bike. There were two pictures that were shown for this bike, and this is them. So there's a wide shot of the whole bike itself, and then a close-up of the seat post. Now, one of the things that I did spot on this, although forks don't look original, handlebars, it's got a Redline stem, the seat's junk, rims look cheap, probably not the original cranks, but I also noticed there's a little lump on the seat stay down at the bottom where it's just about to join to the chainstay. So the owner didn't really offer up any information, but I kind of thought, okay, had this frame snapped at some point and it's been welded back together. So in fact, when I received this bike, the whole dropout had snapped off and it had been re-welded on. Obviously not something that is a good thing to do to buy a bike like that. I knew that there was something up with this one, but I did purchase it anyway. Another couple of my purchases here is my 97 Menace. Unfortunately, when I bought it, it was missing half of the brake boss. I've kept hold of it because I will remove those and just put a caliper brake on the rear. My 88 Peregrine Expert, the seller conveniently hid the picture of the keyhole. As you can see, they kind of nicely cropped that out because it had a pretty horrible crack in that spot. I did renegotiate the price with the seller, and I've had the keyhole crack brazed. Something to look out for on all Mongoose mid-school BMX models is cracking around the keyhole. They did have a 26mm seat post, and a lot of times people would put a 25/4 in it if the seat post, their original seat post went missing or bent or whatever, and that caused them to over tighten the seat tube clamp, which would cause crimping and then it would eventually crack. I've found over the years that some early 90s Redlines had a problem with exactly that on that PL24, the keyhole crack. They probably are using or were using steel tubing that was a bit too thin and always prone to cracking. Towards the end of the 90s, they put the keyhole at the front of the tube. That stopped the pressure at the back, causing some of that cracking. The other cause, as I've discussed, is the wrong size seat posts going into the frame. Many of these issues are repairable, but in most cases, catastrophic failure of the seat tube or head tube, those kinds of things, is an expensive fix, and generally you will not get that money back. Okay, well that's it for the episode. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you found this video as useful as my previous video on Beware of Fakes. I hope you don't get caught out buying a damaged BMX. Let me know in the comments below if you've bought something that has turned out to be a dud. So give us a like and subscribe to the channel so I can keep making this kind of content. Anyway, thanks again. See you next time.